Once upon a time, in a busy city filled with noise, smoke, and endless movement, there lived a young man named Ade. Every morning, before the sun rose, the streets would already hear the sounds of voices honking, traders shouting, and generators rumbling like angry spirits. In the middle of all that chaos, Ade would wake up early, wash quickly, and head to the construction site where he worked. Ade was one of the most hardworking young men anyone could ever meet. He carried heavy bags of cement, mixed concrete under the hot sun, climbed tall scaffolding without complaining, and sometimes walked until his hands became swollen. While other workers grumbled and dragged their feet, Ade always kept moving. Even his supervisor admired him. "Ade," the foreman would often say, "if every worker here was like you, this building would finish in half the time." Ade would only smile humbly and continue working. But there was one thing Ade looked forward to every single day more than anything else: Madam Amina's restaurant. The Roadside restaurant sat beside a busy junction, not too far from the construction site. From morning till midnight, and somehow even till dawn, the place never slept. Thick clouds of delicious aroma floated endlessly through the air. The scent of spicy jollof rice, fried plantain, pepper soup, roasted meat, steaming amala, egusi soup, and freshly fried fish could make a hungry man weak instantly. People came from everywhere just to eat there. Construction workers wearing dusty boots, office workers in neat shirts losing their ties while eating loudly and laughing with colleagues, taxi drivers parked carelessly by the roadside to grab quick meals. Even rich men in shiny black cars stopped there regularly, stepped out in expensive shoes just to taste Madam Amina's cooking. People often joked that her food was to die for, and honestly, many believed it. Some customers had become so addicted to her cooking that they stopped cooking at home completely. Husbands would tell their wives not to bother making dinner because they were already going to Madam Amina's place after work. Students spent their pocket money there daily. Some customers even carried takeaway bowls home for midnight meals. Madam Amina cooked everything, anything people desired. Madam Amina somehow had it already. The most shocking part was that the restaurants operated 24 hours every single day. Morning customers met night customers. Night customers met dawn customers. No matter the hour, Madam Amina was always there. Sometimes people whispered among themselves, "Does this woman even sleep? I passed here by 2 a.m. yesterday and saw her serving food. I came back by 5 a.m. and she was still awake. She must have special powers." But Madam Amina would simply laugh softly whenever anyone asked. "I just work hard," she would reply calmly. One hot afternoon at the construction site, a new worker arrived. His name was Femi. The foreman introduced him to the workers and explained that he had just arrived from a village to look for a better life in the city. Unlike some workers who ignored newcomers, Ade welcomed him warmly. From that day, the two became close friends. Ade showed him where to fetch water, where to buy cheap tools, and even how to avoid the supervisor whenever he was angry. During break periods, they would sit together under finished buildings and joke while resting. A few days later, during lunch break, Ade wiped sweat from his forehead and said excitedly, "Today, I'm taking you somewhere special." "Where?" Femi asked. "You'll see," Ade replied. The moment they approached Madam Amina's restaurant, Femi's eyes widened. The place was buzzing with life. Plates clattered loudly. Waitresses hurried up and down, carrying trays of food. Men laughed while drinking cold beverages. Smoke from grilled meat rose into the air. Cars lined the roadside while hungry customers argued jokingly over the last piece of meat. "Ah," Femi exclaimed, "this place is big." Ade grinned proudly. "You haven't even tasted the food yet." Ade ordered jollof rice with turkey, and peppered meat, while Femi chose pounded yam with egusi soup. The food arrived, steaming hot. The first spoon Femi tasted nearly made him close his eyes. "This is the best food I've eaten in my life," he said in disbelief. Ade laughed loudly. "I told you." From that day onward, Femi followed Ade there regularly during break periods. Then one evening after work, the two returned again to eat dinner. The restaurant was even busier than usual. Music played from a speaker nearby. Some customers drank and laughed loudly, while others waited impatiently for seats. Waitresses rushed around trying to serve everybody at once. Madam Amina herself stepped out from the kitchen area, carrying a tray. The moment Femi saw her clearly, his entire body froze. His smile vanished immediately. His eyes widened in fear. Ade noticed instantly. "What's wrong with you?" he asked. Femi stared at Madam Amina with trembling lips. "That woman," he whispered slowly. "She looks exactly like someone from my village." Ade laughed. "So what? People look alike." Femi swallowed nervously. "No, you don't understand." "What?" Ade asked. "She looks exactly like a woman who died many years ago." Ade burst into louder laughter. "Stop talking nonsense," he said. "Don't let her hear you comparing her to a dead person. That's not proper." But Femi kept staring. His face had gone pale. "She's too similar," he insisted quietly. "Same face, same eyes, same voice." Ade shook his head. "My friend, this city is full of lookalikes." But Femi was no longer listening. Around them, customers continued eating noisily without paying attention. Femi's breathing became heavier. Then suddenly, in a loud, shaking voice, he shouted, "Mama Tayo!" The entire restaurant became silent for one terrifying second. Madam Amina stopped walking. Slowly, very slowly, she turned around. The moment her eyes met Femi's eyes, she vanished completely. The tray she was holding crashed loudly onto the floor, and immediately, chaos exploded everywhere. People screamed in terror. Chairs scattered violently as customers jumped up in panic. Some stumbled over tables trying to escape. Plates shattered across the ground. Men abandoned their food and ran without looking back. Phones dropped onto the ground. Drinks spilled everywhere. Women cried loudly while waitresses pushed each other trying to flee. Ade's eyes widened with pure horror. For a moment, his legs refused to move. Then panic struck him violently. Without even waiting for Femi, Ade turned and ran as fast as he could through the crowd. Behind him, Femi also screamed and turned to run, but his leg hit a fallen chair. He stumbled heavily onto the ground. People nearly trampled him in their desperation to escape. Femi quickly struggled up again and continued running in blind panic beside Ade as the terrifying screams from Madam Amina's restaurant echoed throughout the night. Ade and Femi did not stop running. They ran past closed shops, jumped over gutters, pushed through crowds, and nearly got hit by speeding motorcycles. Fear pumped through their bodies like fire. Their hearts hammered violently inside their chests as the terrifying image of Madam Amina disappearing replayed again and again in their minds. At one point, Ade looked back briefly as though expecting to see her chasing them, but the street behind them was empty. Still, they kept running. Finally, after what felt like forever, the two young men became completely exhausted. Their legs weakened terribly, and their breathing turned painful. Femi stumbled first. "Ade, I can't," he gasped. Ade himself was barely standing. The two of them finally stopped beside a quiet roadside, far away from the restaurant area. They collapsed heavily onto the dusty ground, breathing like men who had escaped death itself. Sweat soaked their clothes completely. Their chests rose and fell rapidly as they struggled to catch their breath. Cars occasionally passed by them, but neither of them cared. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Only the sound of their heavy breathing filled the night air. Ade finally sat upright, still panting hard. He wiped sweat from his face with trembling hands and leaned against a broken concrete by the roadside. Femi sat beside him, staring blankly ahead like someone who had just seen a nightmare come alive. Ade swallowed hard. What? What was that? He asked between breaths. Femi remained silent. Ade looked at him seriously now, fear still visible in his eyes. Femi, what just happened? He said quietly. How do you know Madam Amina? Femi took a deep shaky breath. For a moment, he looked afraid to speak. Then slowly, he turned toward Ade. I know her from my village, he said. Ade frowned immediately. What do you mean? Femi rubbed his sweaty palms together nervously. About 10 years ago, he began slowly. Madam Amina lived in our village. Ade stared at him carefully. She was also a food seller back then, Femi continued. Not as big as this one here in the city, just a small roadside cooking spot in the village. And her son, Tayo, was my childhood friend. Tayo and I grew up together. We played football together, went to the stream together, climbed mango trees together. We were very close. I remember when Madam Amina first started her food business, he said. At the beginning, things were very hard for her. Hardly anybody bought from her. Most people preferred eating at home with their families. Sometimes she would cook plenty of food and end up throwing most of it away. But one day, everything changed. People started rushing to her place. At first, it was normal, a few customers here and there. Then more came, then even more. Within weeks, the entire village became obsessed with her food. Farmers, traders, businessmen, everybody went there. Once evening reached, her place would become crowded beyond imagination. You would see men abandoning their wives' meals at home just to go and eat at Madam Amina's place. Some farmers would return from their farm tired and dirty. Instead of greeting their families properly, the moment they dropped their tools, they would rush straight to Madam Amina's food spot. Men lined up carrying plates themselves just to get food. Married men, young men, even old men. Some even washed their own plates there happily, just for another serving. The women in the village became worried. At first, they thought it was just because her food tasted good. But things kept getting worse. Many husbands stopped eating food cooked by their wives completely. Even younger boys no longer ate their mother's meals. Some children started stealing money from their parents just to buy her food secretly. Ade shook his head slowly in disbelief. It affected everybody. Soon, peace disappeared from many homes in the village. You could hear husbands and wives fighting almost every day. Women cried constantly. Some marriages even broke apart completely. Some men divorced their wives because of endless arguments over Madam Amina's food. The women became desperate. They couldn't take it anymore. One day, many of them gathered together and went to report Madam Amina to the head of the village. The head of the village didn't take them seriously. He laughed. He said they were behaving like jealous women. He called their complaints a joke, but the women knew something was wrong. Tayo once told me that Madam Amina never allowed him to eat the food. No matter how hungry Tayo was, Madam Amina never served him the food she sold. If Tayo asked for it, she would become angry immediately. She always cooked separate meals for him inside the house. She warned him constantly, never touch this food, she would tell him. Sometimes she even beat him whenever he moved close to the pot. And as time passed, the situation in the village became worse. People became completely addicted. At first, they only spent most of their money there, but later, people started selling their properties. Some sold goats, some sold pieces of land, some women secretly sold their wrappers and jewelry, all just to get money from Madam Amina's food. The addiction became madness. And as time passed, people started behaving strangely. It wasn't something obvious at first, but little by little, they changed. Some people would sit quietly for hours, staring into space without blinking. Some stopped laughing completely. Others walked around looking absent-minded, like their thoughts were far away. Some parents stopped caring about their children properly. You would greet somebody, and they would answer 5 seconds later, like they were waking from sleep. And sometimes their eyes looked empty, like something inside them was disappearing slowly. Ade felt goosebumps rise on his skin as he listened to Femi's story about Madam Amina. One woman in the village finally became bold enough to speak openly. Her name was Eniola. She called a secret meeting at her compound one evening. At the meeting, angry voices filled the air as babies cried on their mothers' backs. Some women complained bitterly. "My husband no longer sleeps at home. My children steals money from me. My son looks like he's losing his mind. Our homes are breaking apart." That night, the women agreed on one thing. They would discover Madam Amina's secret, no matter what. Days later, something terrible happened. One afternoon, Tayo returned home after we finished playing football. He was very hungry, but Madam Amina wasn't around. The pots of food she prepared for selling were already ready inside the kitchen. Tayo had spent months smelling the food every single day without tasting it, so he finally ate some. At first, it was only a little. When Madam Amina returned home, she didn't notice anything. But from that day, Tayo became addicted too. He started hiding and eating it secretly whenever his mother wasn't watching. At night, in the afternoon, anytime he got the chance. Before Madam Amina found out, it was already too late. The food had already done to him what it did to the others. When Madam Amina finally discovered the truth, she screamed like a mad woman. She cried and slapped Tayo repeatedly, but Tayo barely reacted. He only kept asking for more food. That same night, Madam Amina left the house in secret. She wrapped herself with a cloth and hurried toward the river at the edge of the village. But she didn't know something. The women had been secretly watching her for days. The women followed her quietly through the darkness. The night was cold. The women hid behind trees and bushes, watching Madam Amina. Then suddenly, the river started moving. The water began bubbling violently. A terrible smell filled the air, and then a creature came out of the river. The creature was very tall. Its skin looked dark and rotten like wet-bone wood. Long strands of river weed hung from its body. Its arms and legs were long. Its eyes glowed pale white in the darkness. And when it opened its mouth, it had rows of sharp teeth like broken bones. The women hiding nearby nearly screamed from fear. Some covered their mouths to stop themselves from screaming. The creature stood halfway inside the river, staring at Madam Amina. The women hiding near the river were terrified. None of them had ever seen such a creature before. The thing stood inside the dark water, staring at Madam Amina, while the river bubbled around it. Madam Amina fell to her knees and started crying. "Please," she begged. "My son has eaten the food. Save him. Please save my son." The creature stared at her silently for a long moment. Then finally, it spoke in deep, frightening voice that sounded almost like water moving through stones. "There is one way," the creature said. Madam Amina immediately crawled closer. The creature told her that when she gets home, she must cook food herself and feed her son before midnight. Madam Amina quickly asked what kind of food she would prepare. But the creature answered strangely. "Any food will do," it said. "Feed him before midnight and he will be free." The women hiding behind the trees became confused. They could see Madam Amina talking desperately and crying, but the river wind and distance prevented them from hearing the conversation clearly. Then the creature slowly sank back into the river. The women quickly ran back to the village in fear. When they got back, they quickly woke the others and told them everything they had seen. Some people were terrified, others became angry. One elderly woman shouted that Madam Amina was the cause of all their suffering. Before long, the women gathered weapons, cutlasses, sticks, brooms, firewood, even farming tools. They marched straight to Madam Amina's house that same night. When they arrived, Madam Amina was already cooking. Tayo sat nearby, looking weak and restless. The moment Madam Amina saw the crowd approaching with weapons, fear entered her eyes. The women stormed into the compound angrily. Eniola pointed at her immediately. "Confess," she shouted. "Tell us what you have done to this village." Other women began yelling too. "Release our husbands! Release our children! Stop this evil!" But Madam Amina denied everything. She kept insisting she was innocent. "I have done nothing," she cried. "Why are you people attacking me?" The women became furious. One of them kicked over a pot. Another scattered plates across the ground. Others started throwing cooking ingredients everywhere. Madam Amina panicked immediately. She became terrified that they would destroy the food she was preparing. She begged them desperately, "Please, stop. Don't throw the food away." But the women continued scattering everything. One woman even grabbed a pot cover and threw it into the fire. That was when Madam Amina screamed loudly. "Stop!" she cried. "I will confess." The compound suddenly became silent. Even the angry women froze. Madam Amina fell to the ground crying heavily. Then slowly, she confessed everything. Madam Amina admitted that years earlier, when her business was failing, she became desperate for wealth and customers. And one day, she secretly visited a herbalist deep inside the forest. She begged the herbalist for help. The herbalist then told her about an ancient river spirit called Mami Wata. The herbalist also advised her that it would not be wise to seek the creature, but Madam Amina ignored the warning. She insisted. So the herbalist performed rituals and summoned the creature. Madam Amina said the river creature appeared and gave her a small black jar. The creature instructed her to pour tiny amounts of the jar's contents into her cooking, and once she did, people became addicted. But the strangest thing of all was that the creature demanded nothing in return. It only told her one thing. It wished to feed on the greed, desperation, and hidden desires of anyone who ate the food prepared with its gift. At first, Madam Amina believed there was no real danger to it. To her, it sounded harmless. After all, the creature was not asking for blood, sacrifices, or money, like the dark tales she had heard growing up. And in the beginning, everything seemed perfect. But only after noticing so many strange behaviors among the villagers did she realize that something was wrong. And when she confronted the herbalist about it, the man reminded her about how he had warned her that it was dangerous to seek the creature, and told her that the creature would feed on the greed, desires, and desperation of anyone who tasted her food until nothing remained, and then it would take their soul. Madam Amina then told him that she didn't want any part of it anymore. But the herbalist told her that there was no going back, and that if she tried to leave it, she would die. When the villagers heard this confession, fear spread everywhere. Some women started crying. Some men stepped backward in horror. The villagers immediately decided she must be banished from the village. But Madam Amina quickly stopped them. She told them there was still hope. She explained what the river creature told her that night. She said if the affected villagers ate the food prepared by her before midnight, the hold over their souls would break. Then she begged the villagers to bring everyone affected. The villagers scattered in different directions. Some women rushed home to drag their husbands there. Some brought their brother. Others carried their children. Fathers brought daughters. Mothers brought sons. Some even carried weak elderly parents. The entire village became chaos. Soon, Madam Amina's compound filled with people whose eyes looked empty and distant. The villagers allowed Madam Amina to continue cooking, and she prepared the food quickly while everyone waited nervously. As midnight drew closer, the affected villagers began eating. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly, people started changing. The emptiness in their eyes disappeared. Some blinked repeatedly, like they had just woken from deep sleep. Others looked around in confusion. Husbands suddenly recognized their crying wives. Children ran into their mothers' arms. Old men began weeping. And Tayo suddenly looked at his mother clearly and called her mama properly for the first time in a long while. Madam Amina immediately grabbed him and hugged him tightly while crying. All around the compound, families reunited. People hugged one another happily. Some villagers fell to their knees, thanking God. But then, the river suddenly rumbled. The ground shook slightly. A loud, furious voice echoed across the village from the direction of the river. "Amina!" The voice roared. Everyone froze in fear. The river water rose violently in the darkness. Trees near the river bent as powerful winds blew. But despite the terror, Madam Amina didn't care anymore. She held Tayo tightly and kept crying happily because her son had finally returned to normal. But suddenly, Madam Amina suddenly started coughing. She coughed, then coughed again and again. Before anyone understood what was happening, she started vomiting blood. The villagers screamed in shock. Madam Amina collapsed onto her knees, trembling violently. More blood poured from her mouth. Then she began shouting in agony. The joyful celebration in Madam Amina's compound quickly turned into fear and confusion. Villagers rushed towards her immediately. "Help her! Bring water! Call somebody!" Women surrounded her in panic, while Tayo held his mother tightly, crying uncontrollably. "Mama! Mama!" Madam Amina's body trembled violently on the ground. Blood stained her clothes as she struggled to breathe. The villagers watched helplessly. Some women tried lifting her. Others prayed loudly, but nothing worked. Madam Amina weakly grabbed Eniola's hand and shook her head slowly. "Don't waste your efforts," she whispered painfully. The crowd became silent. With difficulty, Madam Amina continued speaking. "I broke the agreement," she said. "The moment I freed them, I betrayed Mami Wata." Fear spread through the villagers again at the mention of the river spirit's name. Madam Amina looked quickly at her son. "I don't think I will survive this." Tayo cried harder. "No, Mama. Please, no." But Madam Amina only touched his face weakly. At least now, her son's eyes were alive again. At least now, he was free. Slowly, her breathing became weaker. The villagers watched helplessly. Then finally, Madam Amina's body became still. Silence fell over the compound. Only the sound of Tayo's crying could be heard in the cold night air. The villagers buried Madam Amina the following day. Many people attended the burial despite everything that had happened. Some pitied her, some feared her, others still did not know whether to hate her or feel sorry for her. But everyone agreed on one thing: her greed had nearly destroyed the entire village. Life slowly returned to normal afterwards. Men returned to eating meals cooked by their wives. Families reunited peacefully. Children stopped stealing money. The strange emptiness vanished from the villagers' eyes. For many years, the story of Madam Amina became a warning parents told their children. But that was not the end. After her death, strange rumors started spreading. Travelers passing through nearby towns sometimes claimed they saw a woman who looked exactly like Madam Amina. They said she owned small roadside restaurants. Some described the same smile, the same voice, and the same unbelievable delicious food. At first, the villagers thought it was impossible. After all, they buried her themselves. But the rumors continued. One trader claimed he saw her in a distant town. Another man swore he ate at her food spot in another city far away. Each time villagers traveled there to confirm it, they found nothing. No restaurant, no Madam Amina, and no trace. The elders of the village eventually came to believe something terrifying. They believed Mami Oru caused Madam Amina's spirit, a punishment for breaking their agreement. The villagers believe that her spirit is doomed to keep claiming souls for the creature until its demands are finally fulfilled. The roadside became silent again. A cold wind blew past the two young men. Then slowly, Ade remembered the crowded restaurants in the city, the endless customers, the addictive food, the way Madam Amina never seemed to sleep, and finally, the horrifying way she disappeared the moment Femi called her name. Ade's throat became dry. The walk back home that night was one Ade would never forget. Neither he nor Femi spoke much. The once busy city roads now felt strangely frightening to them. Every food seller they passed made Ade uneasy. Every shadow near the roadside made Femi turn nervously. Whenever they heard a woman's voice calling customers in the distance, both of them instinctively looked back in fear. At one point, Ade quietly muttered, "What if she's still there?" Femi said nothing. He only tightened his shaking hands and kept walking faster. The smell of food drifting from roadside restaurants no longer made them hungry. Instead, it filled them with fear. That night, even after reaching their separate homes, neither of them could sleep properly. And deep in their minds, one terrifying thought refused to leave them. What if Madam Amina was still out there somewhere, cooking,